So this is going to be a small history lesson for America. I mean, compared to what's going on today, uh, well, let's just play something now, and then we'll get on to something else later about that. So this is what's happening today in America.
You're not allowed to fund crime, of course. I mean, if I do business with Iran, I go to jail. But we have domestic terrorism on a greater scale than we've had in my lifetime, 50 years. And the funders of this have not been exposed by the federal government, and they haven't been punished. And I'm confused as to why.
Again, I would say that, again, the Department of Justice, who has the lead in all of those investigations, are certainly moving as quickly as possible. Again, it's something that I talk with the Attorney General about almost on a weekly basis.
That was Acting Secretary, DHS Secretary Chad Wolf speaking to Tucker Carlson about the possibility of jailing political opponents. Now, I'm not talking about candidates. I'm talking about members, leadership within the Black Lives Matter movement. You heard clearly Tucker Carlson referring to them as domestic terrorists when, in fact, this country is currently dealing with right-wing terrorist organizations that have carried out multiple acts of violence. But this is apparently an idea that the DOJ is looking into, something that the Department of Homeland Security is considering. And there are more details in the next exchange that you're about to watch. Here's Tucker Carlson elaborating along with Chad Wolf.
Why haven't we seen the leaders of Antifa and BLM arrested and charged for conspiracy under, say, RICO, like the heads of the mafia families were?
Well, this is something I've talked to the AG personally about, and I know that they are working on it. Look, we've seen about 300 arrests across this country regarding civil unrest and protesting, violent protesting, I would say, criminal protesting, criminal rioting occur. About 300.
Before we go on this, right, the RICO laws were to control organised crime, and most of what they're doing was selling drugs, prostitution, gambling, not paying tax to the government. That's why the RICO laws were introduced, to catch people conspiring to do these things. Antifa, BLM, are not criminal organisations. They are people protesting injustice. So it doesn't fall under the category of RICO. What the fuck is this cunt talking about? Anyway, I'll let him go on.
Arrest. About a third of those, or 100 of those arrests, have been in Portland specifically, and I know the Department of Justice has charged about 74 or 75 individuals there in Portland with different federal crimes, and we'll continue to see how those investigations are going. Department of Justice is also targeting and investigating the head of these organizations, the individuals that are paying for these individuals to move across the country. What we know, Tucker, is that we have seen groups and individuals move from Portland to other parts of the country.
Right.
We had about 175 arrests in Kenosha. Almost 100 of them were from out of state. So we know they're moving around. We've seen them in D.C., in Sacramento, and elsewhere.
I don't know, but I might be wrong about this, but didn't people from all across the state, when Obama was president, travel all across America to come to Washington, D.C. and complain and have rallies with, you know, get rid of the black man and all that, you know, show us your birth certificate. Didn't they come and complain in 2016? Travel, Conservatives travelled from all across America to come to Washington, D.C. to complain about why haven't you arrested Hillary Clinton? Like, so these people are travelling to, march on the streets and complain about what's going on. Suddenly they've got to be arrested for RICO? Because what? The GOP don't like them? Republicans and Conservatives think they're a threat? Well, why weren't all these conservative, red-necked, idiots, why weren't they a threat when they stormed a courthouse in their state, when they stormed the sitting state House and Senate, with guns on their hips? Why weren't they declared to be terrorists. I mean, they're walking about with guns and saying they're not leaving, refusing to wear masks when it was mandated, you know, shouting and spitting on cops. And, you know, I mean, that was your right wing, not Antifa, not the Black Lives Matter. That was your right wing. Your supposed, like, no, well organised militias. They were doing that stuff. Why weren't they declared as a threat to the states or to, you know, good order and justice? Anyway.
Organized. We've seen similar tactics being used from Portland and other cities across the country as well. So we know that there's organization. I know the Department of Justice is also looking at that as well.
So anyway, excuse me. That's today in America. Let's go back to an earlier time. Does anybody know the name Alexander Hamilton? Does anybody know the name Aaron Burr? Well, Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton were founding fathers of America. Let's have a little reminder of the history of these people, these founding fathers of these great builders of a nation. So we're going back in time.
He was a soldier, a lawyer, and crassly, a politician. He used his company's funds to fund his allies. He campaigned for himself and his causes door to door. His party removed judges they didn't like to replace them with their friends. In a time when rumors of foreign interference in national affairs ran rampant, people openly speculated that he was in league with those foreign powers. It was 1806, and the United States was grappling with what some might describe as the nation's first real modern politician. His name was Aaron Burr, and his story deserves to be remembered. He was born into privilege, the son of the president of Princeton University and the grandson of noted theologian Jonathan Edwards. Orphaned at an early age after his parents and grandparents died, his uncle raised him. He went to the college his father founded, joined the Revolutionary Army after the battles of Lexington and Concord. Burr started his military career under General Richard Montgomery, joining him in the Quebec campaign, and distinguished himself when he ran onto the battlefield trying to recover the general's corpse after Montgomery was shot in the neck. A lieutenant colonel, his regiment was devastated by British artillery at the Battle of Monmouth, where he collapsed from heat stroke. He left the army in 1779 due to continuing ill health. While Alexander Hamilton was pursuing further glory on the battlefield, Burr became one of the country's spies, doing covert intelligence work. That reputation likely lent credence to later stories of Burr's treachery. He married the widow of a British officer, studied for the bar in Albany, and palled around with General Philip Schuyler and his son-in-law, Alexander Hamilton. Relocating to New York City in 1783, Burr began a new career, opening a law practice and then serving in the New York Assembly. While in the Assembly, he introduced bills that would have allowed women to vote and abolished slavery. In 1794, he bought Richmond Hill, a house that has served as headquarters for Washington until American forces retreated in New York. He hosted the renowned Mohawk chief Joseph Brant and treated him as an equal, far different treatment than the chief could have expected from Burr's contemporaries. Unlike other politicians of his era, Burr exhibited a raw ambition and drive, something that other founders might have seen as gauche. In 1789, Governor George Clinton appointed him Attorney General. In a coup in 1791, the New York legislature elected him U.S. Senator over the incumbent, his former friend Philip Schuyler, and served in that office until 1797. Reaching even higher in the political sphere, Burr ran in the 1796 presidential election, coming in fourth. In the 1800 election, Thomas Jefferson was elected president, and Burr, following the rules of the era, was elected vice president because he received the second largest number of electoral votes. Some historians have described Aaron Burr as America's first professional politician. This set him apart from his contemporaries, who generally would have argued that they were serving out of a sense of personal service rather than any sort of personal gain or ambition. For example, Alexander Hamilton, as the Treasury Secretary, refused to accept his war pension, even though he would have been entitled to it, because he thought it gave the appearance of a conflict of interest. Aaron Burr, on the other hand, didn't seem to much care about the appearance of personal gain. Burr, however, pioneered many tactics we'd recognize in modern politics. He compiled voter lists, helped men register to vote. He went door to door, openly campaigning to secure the vote. He used the political machinery of the city for his ends, getting Democrat-Republicans elected. This seems politics as usual to us now, but at the time, the founders and their contemporaries frowned on Burr's tactics as unseemly. Such was Burr's reputation that Hamilton, who had soured on his former friend after his politicking had unseated his father-in-law in the New York Senate seat, worried to a friend in 1793. In fact, I take it, he is for or against nothing but as it suits his interest or ambition. He is determined, as I conceive, to make his way to be the head of the popular party and to climb to the highest honors of the state, and as much higher as circumstances may permit. In 1799, Burr got a state charter for his water company, the Manhattan Company. On the surface, it was going to install a much-needed sewer system for New York City, but buried in the fine print was a clause that allowed the company to invest its profits, i.e., to become a bank. Burr used the Manhattan Company to fund his fellow Democrat-Republicans in the same manner that Hamilton used the Bank of New York to fund Federalists. The Manhattan Company survives today as part of J.P. Morgan Chase, and the Bank of New York still exists as well. Burr did not have private wealth. He was perpetually in debt from various schemes, even though he had a successful law practice. In his private correspondence, Hamilton estimated that Burr owed $80,000 to one creditor and that there were others. Burr, unlike many of the other influential men of his time, didn't save all his correspondence, so it was unclear what his true financial situation may have been. We do know that he borrowed against his house and from his company many times. While Burr left his personal journal behind, his personal papers did not survive. This may have helped create the image we have of Burr as the villain of the early republic, because what does survive are the negative opinions of his contemporaries.
But I'll just stop at you for a minute. I just want to go over what we've heard already. So Burr at one time was friends with Hamilton, but over time Burr became a politician while Hamilton was still fighting the war against the British. And Burr started to be innovative and basically, as this man has said, the very first real politician in the Americas. He started to use tactics which we now think is the only way to get elected today. But he was doing it in the 1700s. A very forward-thinking and modern man, I would think. Wanted to free slaves, treated Indians as equals, and wanted women to have the vote. In the 1700s, you can imagine what he was looked on, how he was looked upon by the other politicians who, although they said he was only interested in his, what he could get, the power he could get, basically they were the people trying to keep the power all to themselves, and he was one of the people, I think, a progressive, you would probably have called him, although back then it was called a Democratic Republican. Not a Federalist, but a Democratic Republican. And this is the man, Burr, if you look him up, is called a traitor to America. And we'll go into that later. I'm sure he'll talk about it. Let's go on.
Even George Washington was wary of Burr. He wrote, "By all that I have known and heard, Colonel Burr is a brave and able officer, but the question is whether he has not equal talents at intrigue." During the election of 1800, Jefferson and Burr competed for the office. Although a Federalist and not of Jefferson's party, Hamilton favored Jefferson because he believed Jefferson was the kind of gentleman politician he envisioned as appropriate for the young country. By contrast, Burr, who openly campaigned, was not the kind of person Hamilton and other founders saw as proper. In intervening in the 1800 election, Hamilton wrote to a friend that Burr was without property and loves nothing but himself, thinks of nothing but his own aggrandizement, and will be content with nothing short of permanent power in his own hands. Although Burr became vice president, the animosity between he and Hamilton never ceased. Jefferson never trusted Burr, and he secured the passage of the 12th Amendment, which meant that he got to pick his running mate in 1800.
Yeah, you just mentioned this, right? At the time of these elections in the 1800s, right? In fact, no, 1800. When the president was elected, the vice president was the person who got the second biggest amount of votes in the country. It wasn't something, the president didn't pick a running mate and have him as his vice president. The electorate voted for whoever was running for president, and whoever got the most votes became president, and whoever got the second most votes became vice president. Now that, to me, the Founding Fathers set that up. And Jefferson changed that. Thomas Jefferson changed that so that he could say, well, the guy who got the second amount of votes, he gets no power, and I get to choose who's going to be vice president. I think that's when the American dream, the Americans' new idea about politics, that's when it started to be perverted. Away from the Founding Fathers' ideas into what we've got today in America, which is no better than anywhere else now. Anyway, let's continue.
1904. Licking his wounds, Burr went back to New York, switched parties, and ran as a Federalist in the gubernatorial primary, but lost. He blamed Hamilton for his defeat after learning Hamilton had been quoted in a newspaper as saying he thought Burr a dangerous man and one who ought not be trusted with the reins of government, and that there was a still more despicable opinion that Hamilton had of Burr.
You've got to remember as well, Hamilton said to people at the time, he's a man of no property. You know what I mean? It's like, we keep hearing this from the right wing now all the time, from everybody under Trump. They keep saying it, these left wingers, these poor people, they don't have any skin in the game, But back then, they were saying this about a man who was trying to be progressive and move America forward so that everybody had the same opportunities. And the people like Hamilton and Jefferson were saying, oh, we can't have this man. He's driving us mad with these new-founded ideas of, populism and the people having real power over us, the rich and famous and landowners, No better than what you had kicked out. You kicked the British out because of that in the first place. And they became no better. Anyway, we'll go on.
Burr demanded an apology that Hamilton would not give. After letters of negotiation failed, parties were sent on their fate-filled journey to Weehawken, from which only one of them would survive. After killing Hamilton in the duel, Burr ran out of New York under threats of indictments. He fled to South Carolina, where his daughter, Theodosia, was living with her husband, Joseph Alston. He spent time with his grandson, Aaron Burr Alston, who had been born in 1802. In another action that set him apart from his contemporaries, Burr ensured his daughter was educated, according to the wisdom of the time that education was wasted on a woman. He even had a picture of Mary Wollstonecraft, the women's right advocate, on his wall. Burr settled for hiding out and letting the furor in New York die down. By 1805, he believed it was safe to return to D.C. In his role as president of the Senate, Burr assisted Jefferson's efforts to remove Federalists from the judiciary. But after being removed from the ticket and as a lame duck vice president in 1805, Burr oversaw the first and only impeachment trial of a Supreme Court justice. Justice Samuel Chase faced impeachments based on charges of political bias. Burr helped ensure that the senators would not vote to impeach the embattled justice. After departing the Senate, giving a farewell address about the role of the Senate that was said to be so eloquent that it made many people weep, but sadly for which no transcript has survived, Burr set out for the West with a new scheme for wealth, this time in land speculation. Along the way, he gathered support and farmers to come with him to a proposed settlement in Louisiana. The Louisiana Territory became part of the United States in 1803. Prior to that, it switched hands between the French and the Spanish. During Jefferson's first term, it was transferred back to the French. The Haitian Revolution cut into French colonial profits, and by 1803 the French were ready to sell their North American territory to the Americans. General James Wilkinson took possession of the territory for Jefferson and became the governor. Wilkinson established a military base known as Cantonment Wilkinson on the Ohio River south of Fort Massac in the Illinois Territory. Military bases on the Ohio were ordered by President Washington and Hamilton in response to threats from Spain and France, which at the time were on the far western border of the United States. While the Spanish had been in charge of the Louisiana Territory, they had interfered in American trade with Native Americans, making trade agreements and discouraging Native Americans from making trade agreements with the United States. Later that spring, in 1805, Aaron Burr and General Wilkinson met. Burr had previously gone to Nashville for an honorary dinner and received a warm welcome. There he would have met a young Andrew Jackson, securing his support. Burr said he was trying to muster against a feared Spanish invasion from Mexico. Rumors spread, however, that he was instead planning his own empire. The rumor went, at Fort Massac in Illinois Territory, around the campfire and under the cover of darkness, Wilkinson and Burr discussed a coup that could split the nation, with Spain getting the southwestern United States. Burr would get the western states and start his own empire. Wilkinson sent letters to Burr documenting the plans. Eerily, Hamilton had earlier predicted such treachery. He warned that Burr would make a bargain and sale with some foreign power because great ambition unchecked by principle or the love of glory is an unruly tyrant. By 1806, Burr was ready to act on the plan. He sent a coded letter to Wilkinson stating that he was ready to begin. Jefferson opened a letter from his general and was shocked by what he read. Burr was plotting a coup with the assistance of Spain's Mexico. Jefferson ensured that a warrant was issued against Burr for treason.
Right, so Burr has had a warrant issued against him for treason when he was forming a militia to defend against a possible incursion by the Mexicans into the newly acquired land that they bought from Spain, right? Or France, one of those nations. And we'll get to how it turns out later, but I just want to go into this. Burr is being slandered by the people who are in power at the moment. He's no longer in politics. It has connotations to what's happening today in America with, well, just listen to what Trump is saying about, the Democratic candidate, Joe Biden. He's siding with the leftists, the Marxists, the people who are going to destroy your country. It's the same story. You're just seeing history repeat itself, and I don't know how else to express it than just to say it bluntly like that. Anyway, let's continue.
Thousands of miles away, Burr was gathering farmers to form a settlement to fend off Spanish invasion. He opened a Louisiana newspaper one morning and saw the news that Jefferson had branded him a traitor. He twice turned himself in, and both times judges said that his activities were legal. He was later caught in Alabama, arrested, and taken to Virginia. In 1807, in a courthouse in Richmond, Burr stood accused of treason. His lawyers included former United States Attorney General Edmund Randolph. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Marshall, personally presided over the trial. Marshall may have intervened because he was thankful for how Burr had presided over the impeachment trial of Justice Chase. In Richmond, men of the grand jury took 4 tries to secure an indictment. It was likely because of the limited evidence against him. The only physical evidence of Burr's alleged treason was the supposed letter from Burr to Wilkinson detailing...
Again, this letter that he'd written saying he was ready to, perform this coup and, take over, and you're about to get the gist of some of the best things that America did when it formed its country and went against the law of the land that was in England at the time. America changed its law so that you couldn't just impugn a person's name, drag them into court and then get some people who didn't know what was going on the jury and then, give them this big spiel about this is what I think he's doing, what do you think? America decided that wasn't the way that justice should form or should be conducted. Justice should need evidence, and this is what I love about the American system the way it was back then. It's no longer like that now. It has been changed, but anyway, this is a way back in the 1800s, the early 1800s. Let's continue to see what happens in this court case. It is fascinating. I love getting into the nitty-gritty of real history and seeing how it plays out then and what's going on now,
The plan. However, it was discovered that Wilkinson had penned the note, not Burr. Though Wilkinson said he had copied it from the original, it was thrown out as evidence. Treason is the only crime defined in the Constitution. Treason is levying war against them or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. Article 3, Section 3 requires that either the person confesses in open court or two witnesses testify to an overt act of treason. The founders included these limitations because European monarchies had abused the law of treason to imprison their political opponents in the past. They had the dream of a better system of government for the new democratic republic. Burr did not confess in the Richmond courthouse. The government could not produce two witnesses who would testify to an overt act of treason. This is an important distinction from English law, where one could prove constructive treason, which is the charge that could be made for simply thinking about treason. The United States required an overt act of treason, not just an intent to commit treason. Because the constitutional requirements could not be met, Burr was found not guilty. He was supported by his daughter throughout the trial. Jefferson had asked for the more serious treason charges to be brought instead of misdemeanor charges for interfering in diplomatic relations. Because Jefferson was using his influence by going after a former rival, the treason trial of Aaron Burr was a major test of the early republic and constitutional governance. Chief Justice Marshall ensured the young nation kept its principles of fairness and separation of powers.
There you go, separation of powers. And Trump has crossed that line. He is now using his justice system against his political rivals. You'll see that happening today. The first clip I played you from the Young Turks, what they're trying to do is, these people who are basically standing up for the First Amendment. Is it the First Amendment? No, it's not the First Amendment. What amendment is it? Is it the 14th? The right to gather and complain and have your grievances addressed. I don't know what amendment it is. I'm sorry, I'm a bit drunk now, guys. But yeah, there is an amendment that allows you to do that. So the BLM and Antifa don't have heads. They're not controlled by one person. They gather money just like every other political group does, and they spend it. Once they've got the money's theirs, and they spend it the way they want it, not the way that somebody dictates to them. So they're not led by anybody who gives them money. They have to go and pander to these people, yes, and say, we need your money. And these people feel, they are standing up for the Constitution. I'm going to give them some money. And then once they've got the money, it's their money, right? But Trump and, what's it, Chaz Wolf or whatever his name is, the Secretary of State or the head of the DOJ, whatever it is, And this is funny thing as well, the guy Burr, right, that we're talking about here, Aaron Burr. Now we've got this guy Burr who's in charge of the Department of Justice, and he's a complete Trump lackey, doing what Trump wants and attacking his political rivals and sweeping under the carpet what's going on with Trump's friends, and Trump pardoning people who have already admitted their guilt and been sentenced. Ridiculous, How far America has fallen from the ideology of the Founding Fathers, and yet every single person in America now is wrapping themselves in the Star-Spangled Banner and claiming to be, fighting for the truth and the sort of words of the law written down by the Constitution, and there's nothing going on there. It's basically corruption over and over, and these people are corrupt. The people that brought Burr there to try and do him for treason, that was corruption. They were in power and they didn't like this guy, and for some reason things that he did in the past to tread on their toes, they were going to get him back for it, is what it looks like to me. I don't really know, but I'm just looking at a fascinating bit of history, American history, that I don't hear anybody in the media talk about in America, and they should be dragging this up, man, and saying, look at this. This is exactly what Trump is doing, what these people did, and it didn't work back then. We can't let it work now. We need to get back to the origin of the Founding Fathers' idea for America. You know what I mean? The freedom to seek out your happiness, is freedom to live your life free within the law, you know what I mean? And the law is the most important thing here, but when the law is being twisted and used as a weapon by people in power, your whole system is broken until you fix it. You've got to do something to fix it, and then you can get back on track again,
Although acquitted, Burr's hope of returning to politics were ended for good. He fled to Europe to avoid his creditors, lived in exile for 4 years before returning to America, but used his mother's maiden name for a while to continue hiding. During this period, his grandson died from a fever, and his daughter went missing at sea and was presumed dead. He eventually returned to his law practice in New York and remarried, this time to a wealthy widow who was 19 years younger. Marriage was not a happy one. Ever in debt and continuing his land speculation, Burr started dwindling her fortune. She left him after just 4 months. She chose Alexander Hamilton Jr. as her divorce lawyer. The divorce was finalized on the day he died, in September 1836.
So this kind of ends what was going on with Aaron Burr and Hamilton. But we're not finished. I've got another video that I'm going to be playing after this, but we'll let this finish. I don't know if it goes on to tell you more about America. I'll try to never know. But anyway, there's about 2.5 minutes left in it. I will put the link to this guy's channel and the 2 videos from him because he deserves that. You should go there, you should watch his stuff. The history man, the history guy, he's absolutely fantastic. You really need to go and watch his stuff. But this was eye-opening for me, and I hope you're finding it interesting yourself. But the next video I'm going to be going over is Alexander Hamilton's duels, and what happened to his son and his brother-in-law, and how Burr is involved in that. Obviously he shot and killed Alexander Hamilton during the duel, but that was only one of the duels. I don't want to go into and get spoiled all, but oh my god, right, fantastic. Let's just get to the end of this video and I'll play the next one as well, right.
In 1854, historian Charles Gaillard exposed James Wilkinson as Agent 13 for the Spanish government. Wilkinson's duplicity had been suspected in his day, but not proven. Gaillard went to the Spanish archives and discovered Wilkinson had been on the Spanish payroll during his military career, a highly paid spy for the Spanish Empire.
Remember, Wilkinson was the guy who was fighting in the war alongside Burr. And as he's going to tell you, Wilkinson was implicated in getting Burr arrested for treason, probably to deflect from his treason.
He likely threw suspicion on Burr for treason to avoid closer scrutiny of his own treasonous activities. Fort Massac went mostly forgotten until the early 20th century, when the Daughters of the American Revolution formed and Illinois members were looking for a revolutionary site in their state. They found it in Fort Massac, which had been captured from the British by General George Rogers Clark in his Kaskaskia campaign. They also found a partner in Professor Joseph Blair of the University of Illinois, who wanted a state park system. Together they lobbied the Illinois legislature, and the first state park at Fort Massac was established in 1908. Today visitors can enjoy a replica fort overlooking the Ohio, the ghost of Aaron Burr and James Wilkinson, ever present. History hasn't necessarily been kind to Aaron Burr. He was largely defined by his enemies, partly because his personal papers were lost to history. While Alexander Hamilton's legacy has been refurbished a couple of times, notably by a certain Pulitzer Prize-winning musical, Aaron Burr is still largely seen as one of the villains of early American history. But historians have started to rethink Aaron Burr and his legacy in the last 20 years. Certainly, he saw himself differently than his contemporaries did, and he showed that in the way that he lived his life and the way that he engaged in politics. He understood that raw political power could be used to help your friends, and he did so without apology to his contemporaries. Soldier, attorney, senator, vice president, early advocate of women's rights and Native American rights, possible traitor. Aaron Burr deserves to be remembered as much more than just the guy who shot Alexander Hamilton. I hope you enjoy.
So there you go. That's the life and times of Aaron Burr, Hamilton's nemesis. So Alexander Hamilton, yeah, I mean, we did have a big musical made about him. I'm sure it was fantastic. I haven't seen it, but I've seen a lot of people talk about it on TV and stuff, and hail it is fantastic, and But Aaron Burr, yeah, supposedly perhaps a traitor, But when you look at his life, you look at the things he did, the things he tried to do for, women, the American Indians, trying to set up a colony in new lands bought off of Spain and France and Mexico, and set up a militia to defend against incursions. And then to be brought to trial as a traitor for doing those things for the people who were living in those non-states at the time. They weren't states. They were new lands. They hadn't become states yet, I don't think. They are states now, and that's what he was talking about, Illinois. They weren't states at the time, and he was out in the wilds fighting for the people, like he'd done his whole life. He went door to door, getting people to vote for him. Before even people today don't even go door to door. Some of your senators and your House of Representatives, they don't even hold town halls anymore. Don't talk to the populace. They just expect to get re-elected every year, and most of the time they do, Such a change in times from the history that America was showing us, where it was a great new undertaking, a fantastic new idea of how to run, the government politic, and then you see how even in those days it was being perverted and corrupted by the people in power, the landowners, the rich, and So anyway, that's the life and times of Aaron Burr Hamilton's nemesis, by the history guy. I will put that in the links. A link to the video and a link to the history guy's channel, But I think it is fantastic. Anyway, so we're going to go on to the next video, which is Alexander Hamilton's 3 duels. I don't think there was only just 3 duels he was involved in, but the history man, the history guy, is going to explain it all to us. The history of Hamilton, his family, and extended family, how Burr interacts with that, and then he's already mentioned that Burr started a bank. He tricked him into giving them in small print, the ability to use money for a bank from the money he got for building a drainage system in New York, and used that to finance getting his friends elected into power and stuff like that. And anyway, we're going to rehash some of that and some new stuff you might not know about Alexander Hamilton and his family, and America's history. It's fantastic. I love this. It's so intriguing and interesting, So here we go. Alexander Hamilton's 3 duels.
Hi, I'm the history guy. I have a degree in history and I love history, and if you love history too, this is the channel for you. Alexander Hamilton, the fiery founding father who came to America as an immigrant and an orphan and wound up being one of the most powerful people in the nation, has received a lot of attention lately, owing to the 2015 musical based on the biography by Ron Chernow. And that is well deserved. Alexander Hamilton was brilliant and a complex and interesting personality who played a vital role in the founding of the nation. But he is almost as well known for the circumstances of his death. Shot to death in a duel with Aaron Burr, the Vice President of the United States, as anything he did in life. And as intriguing as the Hamilton-Burr duel was, it is even more interesting if you look at it in context of Alexander Hamilton's history with the practice of dueling.
So there you go. Alexander Hamilton shot to death in a duel and killed in a duel by the Vice President of America. That's fucking astounding. I had no idea of that. I don't even know if they sang about that in the musical, because I have never seen the musical, right? Not my thing, the musical. But this, raw bones, history, I love it. Just give me the facts, let me understand what was going on. I don't need anything into it. I'm just an observer of the world. I see these things, I hear about these things, man. It's left up to me to make my own, thoughts and my own, draw my own conclusions about it. But that is fascinating to me, because I had no idea that Alexander Hamilton was shot to death by the Vice President of America, who was Aaron Burr. I had no idea that was the case until just yesterday. Was it this morning? I think it might have been this morning. It might have been today. Well, no, it was yesterday morning because it's now Wednesday, Tuesday. So, but wasn't the history guy give us the rundown? So it's we're 57 seconds in. It's a 10-minute 32 video. So we've not got long to go.
Over his lifetime, Alexander Hamilton was a party to no less than 10 affairs of honor, 7 as a primary and 3 others as someone else's second. And it's even more interesting when you look at the duels that were engaged by members of his family and the odd string of coincidences that tie together the bizarre history of Alexander Hamilton's duels.
He was involved in 10 duels in his life. And back then, dueling was legal. They had a dueling ground where people would go and meet and duel. You'll see this later. I'm not just making this up. You couldn't make this up. Oh my God, yeah. But this, involved in 10 duels, 70 that he was a shooter in, and 3 that he was a second in. Oh my God, Alexander Hamilton. And this apparently is, not just him, but his family were involved in a lot of this as well. I guess these rich people back then, you couldn't say, oh fuck you, I mean, today we cuss each other out, right? We call each other all kinds of names. Back then, even just intimating that you think somebody's a liar might be enough for them to say, I demand honour, let's meet on the dueling grounds. You had to be very careful what you says to people back then. And today, look at us, look at America today, man. Cancelling people for saying words. Just words. You're cancelled. That's it. If you were allowed to today, people would be shooting each other all the time. The dueling ground would never be empty. They would be queuing up to use the dueling ground if it was a thing now. Back then, apparently, it was. And I find that interesting. In Europe, a lot of the time, dueling meant swords, but in America, it obviously meant pistols. And it became pistols in Europe as well, but earlier on, in the earlier days, before gunpowder and stuff like that, yeah, people duelled with swords, horses and javelins and all that, and hacking and bashing each other with all kinds of, clubs and, what do you call them, stars on the end of a chain and swords and, I don't know if they were actually doing it for honour or whether, you could claim somebody's land, steal their wife by killing them on the dueling field. Probably back, the 1300s, that was what it was all about. And in America, I think it was all about getting rid of your rivals, I don't want to hear you have any controversial or opposing voice, you would make an excuse and go and kill that guy or try to, a bit like today, I don't want to hear you tell me I'm wrong. I need a safe place to not hear people, contradict my thoughts, it's like, what the hell, Where's the freedom of speech when you're not able to hear someone else voice their opinion? Anyway, I think America has lost its way. You need to do something to get back to your original idea of your founding fathers, that you're entitled. You're entitled to speak, but other people are entitled to disagree with you. And you're not entitled to want to get a gun and shoot them for it, Your redress is to come back with evidence and eloquent speech, not just scream in their face and throw things at them and, toss a hissy fit. I mean, come on. Are we grown up adults or are we children in the playground? Let's continue with the history guy. I mean, this guy, he has done a lot of research in this, and you obviously got access to a lot of stuff that normal people don't get. I used to do the same thing when I was researching religion back in the 70s, going to the main library in Glasgow, which sometimes you had to make an appointment to go and get certain books that wouldn't allow you to, like, handle with gloves and stuff, and it was like really, really good stuff, man. I liked all that. I wouldn't say I did it just for the sake of it made me feel, sort of like important that I was getting access to this. I learned a lot from looking at these books as well, and understood a lot of what the people went through that made the books, and kind of thought I was getting into their heads a wee bit, and understood what they were doing. They were caught up in their ideology, and they were trying to raise it up on a pedestal and show everybody else that it was great. And yeah, these books, the illuminated books, I think they call them, painted with all kinds of brilliant, fantastic colours. Some of them are faded now, but they're still fantastic to look at. I can only imagine, in my mind, what they must have looked at when they were first painted, But yeah, anyway, let's get back to the history guy.
The story begins with the infamous Hamilton-Reynolds affair. In November of 1792, a man named James Reynolds was accused of financial crimes that involved public funds. When he was arrested, he tried to negotiate a deal by making an astounding claim. The Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton, he said, was involved in the scheme. This information was passed to 3 U.S. senators who went to confront Hamilton about the charges, one of those being the Virginia Senator James Monroe, a future president of the United States. But when they talked to Hamilton, the story took even another twist. Hamilton claimed that his financial dealings with Reynolds had nothing to do with the financial scheme, but instead were blackmail payments that Hamilton was making because he had had an illicit affair with Reynolds' wife.
There we go, right. So today, as I say, this has connotations for today. Your past is your future, I'm not saying that Trump is saying, blah, 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 this, I was being blackmailed, but, he's paying off a porn star before he's running for president. And here, this is what he just said, this senator, or representative senator is going to talk to Hamilton. We've been told that you're involved with this scandal, this criminality of, corruption. And Hamilton tells this future president, it's all about blackmail and, me sticking this guy's wife. And it's like, it is so much the same today. I mean, when you see this stuff going on with, highfalutin politicians, highfalutin Christian leaders, it's like, yeah, this is just your base human beings being human beings. It's like, nothing has changed in thousands of years. Nothing. And I love that.
And Hamilton had letters to prove his story. As the affair would have been a scandal but would not have been illegal, the senators agreed to drop the matter and all agreed that they would keep the details secret. And the entire thing seemed to blow over. That is until 5 years later. In 1792, a man named James Thompson Callender, a scandal-mongering journalist and pamphleteer, published a pamphlet that included details on Hamilton's affair with Mrs. Reynolds, and included some of the letters that had been part of the 1792 investigation. Embarrassed, Hamilton was forced to release publicly details of the affair in order to free himself from charges that he participated in the financial scandal. Hamilton was incensed, and he was convinced that the person who had released the letters was James Monroe. Monroe denied the charge, and the two came very close to calling each other liars, a claim that could very easily lead to one or the other demanding satisfaction in a gentleman's duel. The situation got so bad that in one face-to-face meeting, Alexander Hamilton brought his brother-in-law, English businessman James Barker Church, with him, just in case it turned into a duel then and there, and he had to have a second with him. But the reason the two ended up not fighting a duel had to do with a third party. James Monroe had invited a mutual acquaintance who they had both met while fighting the Revolution to be the intermediary as they argued back and forth, and that
This is where I find it all starts to come together of how people came to hate each other. These people came to hate each other. Listen to who the person is that this other guy brought as an intermediary.
Intermediary thought that they were both being childish and knew that a duel could end their careers. And he was the one that was able to tamp down the rhetoric and prevent the two from escalating to the point where they had to meet on the field of honor, something that could have cost either of them their lives and almost certainly would have cost both of them their political careers. And that person who prevented Alexander Hamilton from having a career-ending duel with James Monroe was Aaron Burr. Burr and Hamilton had a history. At one time they had been friends, but that really changed in 1791. At the time, the U.S. Senate seat from New York was selected not by a vote of the people, but by a vote of the New York legislature. And Aaron Burr had managed to scheme through the legislature to unseat the incumbent Revolutionary War General Philip Schuyler. Philip Schuyler was the father of Elizabeth Schuyler, who was married to Alexander Hamilton. And Hamilton was convinced that Burr was a rogue from the moment that he out-schemed his father-in-law for that Senate seat. But Alexander Hamilton was not the first of Philip Schuyler's sons-in-laws to fight a duel with Aaron Burr. John Barker Church, the English businessman whom Hamilton had brought with him in the meeting with Monroe in case they had to fight a duel then and there, was married to another of Schuyler's daughters, and he hated Burr just as much as Hamilton did. And in 1799, he accused Burr of taking bribes. That led to a challenge, which led to a duel at the dueling grounds in Weehawken, New Jersey. Burr fired first, he missed. Church fired second, and he missed, but he came very close. His bullet tore Burr's cloak just a little bit over, and it would have prevented the duel that killed Alexander Hamilton. Their honors satisfied, they did not fire a second shot. A poignant part of Act 2 of the musical Hamilton is the death of Hamilton's son, Philip, who was killed, of course, in a duel. That duel, which was fought in 1801, was fought between Hamilton's son Philip and a New York City lawyer who had made disparaging comments about Alexander Hamilton. And Philip was shot to death in the duel, which was fought at the dueling grounds in Weehawken, New Jersey, the same place where Philip's uncle had fought the duel with Aaron Burr, and was fought with dueling pistols that Philip Hamilton had borrowed from his uncle, John Barker Church, the same pistols that Church had used in his duel with Aaron Burr. In 1804, Aaron Burr, who was then Vice President of the United States, decided to run for governor of New York, and he lost that election largely because of opposition by Alexander Hamilton. When some disparaging comments about Burr made by Hamilton were published in the paper, it led to a challenge and a duel. That famous duel was fought at the dueling grounds in Weehawken, New Jersey, the same grounds where Hamilton's brother-in-law had dueled the same man, Aaron Burr, and where Hamilton's son, Philip Hamilton, had been killed. And the pistols used in the duel were the set that belonged to John Barker Church, the same set of pistols that had killed Hamilton's son in 1801 and nearly killed Aaron Burr in 1799.
This is where I was like, oh my fucking God, right? Because you're going to hear something now that is absolutely astounding. These people, man. Anyway, right, let's get to it.
Hamilton shot high. Burr struck Hamilton in the chest. A fatal and famous blow.
Remember, Hamilton shot high and Burr shot him in the chest. Let's go on.
Dueling was not uncommon amongst the gentleman class of early America, but fatalities were. Hamilton's participation in so many challenges, even though he only fought the one duel, shows how excessive his sense of honor was, but of course the same could be said of Aaron Burr. It is, however, a supreme irony that Aaron Burr, who had kept Alexander Hamilton from fighting an ill-advised duel with James Monroe, later became the hand of Hamilton's death. The duel effectively ended Burr's political career. Eventually, he was accused of treason in a supposed conspiracy with Spain, and although he was acquitted, he never again served in public office. To this day, he has a reputation, some say unfairly, of being a traitor to the nation. There's still disagreement over exactly what happened in the duel between Hamilton and Burr because no one who was present could say definitively who had fired first. Some claim that Hamilton had missed on purpose, and in fact he left a note behind saying that he planned to do that, although that note might have been a ruse. But others claim that Burr fired first, and it was Burr's shot that caused Hamilton to miss. And that entire question took a bizarre turn in 1976. You see, this infamous set of pistols that was owned by John Barker Church and that was used in all three of those duels involving Hamilton and Burr were purchased in London in 1797, and they stayed in the Church family until 1930 when they were sold to Chase Manhattan Bank, which was, ironically, a descendant of the Manhattan Company, which had been founded by Aaron Burr. And Chase Manhattan Bank still owns the pistols and sometimes puts them on display. But in 1976, Chase Manhattan Bank allowed the Smithsonian Institution to inspect the pistols, and there they found a shocking twist. The pistols had been designed to cheat. One of the pistols had a special mechanism built in so that if you pushed the trigger far forward, it would create a pistol with a hair trigger, which might allow you to fire a hair faster than someone you were fighting in a duel, something that would have been incredibly dishonorable. And as those pistols belonged to Hamilton's family, it's likely that Hamilton knew about that modification and Burr did not. And so some claim that the reason that Alexander Hamilton fired high in his duel with Aaron Burr was because he had chosen to cheat using a pistol with a hair trigger, and that caused him to fire early as he was lowering his pistol. And of course that's an unanswerable question, and maybe that is fitting with the most enigmatic of America's founding fathers.
But it sounds weird, doesn't it? I mean, Alexander Hamilton would have known about that hair trigger ability of that pistol. And did he fire early because he shook a little bit, getting nervous, knew he was breaking the code of honour? Or he left that note saying he intended to miss deliberately. But why would you do that against a person you have been trying to basically get rid of? You know, politically your whole life, basically, you know. Someone you've hated and disparaged verbally. You know, I mean, I don't know, but I'm kind of tending towards he knew and was trying to cheat. And it didn't work. And God, when that gun went off and he didn't hit, I bet he had a sinking feeling in his chest until that bullet hit him in the chest. So Alexander Hamilton, what do you think? A hero? Scoundrel? A man who just thought he had to do the right thing to get rid of someone who he thought was an enemy of the state? Aaron Burr. A good man, a man who tried his best to improve society, a progressive, or a scoundrel and a traitor? I mean, these questions, man, they're just running around my head, man. You know, there's so much in this fantastic bit of history the History Guy has brought to us. I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have, you know what I mean? Because it's just, I just love this stuff, you know. And unfortunately, we don't know what's going on with Trump. I mean, there's a lot of evidence, circumstantial, against him. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence of a cover-up. I don't believe that, you know, the Democrats are eating children. All paedophiles. QAnon is crazy as fuck. There's no way any of that is true. And then you look at Trump's friends, you know, a paedophile who supposedly hung himself in prison. Did he? Did Trump have him bumped off before he could, you know, say, okay, I'm going to tell everybody everything? I mean, he's pardoned people left, right and centre. But could you pardon someone like that? you know, that's swirling around in my head as well, what's going on there, you know. But yeah, let's finish up with what the history guy's got to say now.
It is certainly another twist in the bizarre history of Alexander Hamilton's duels. I'm the History Guy, and I hope you enjoyed this edition of my series, 5 Minutes of History, short snippets of forgotten history, 5 to 10 minutes long. And if you did enjoy, then please go ahead and click that thumbs up button, which is there on your left.
So there you go. Yeah. The History Guy, man. I totally recommend his channel. It is absolutely fantastic. There's lots of stuff like this, and his delves, his 5-10 minute delves into history, and he covers a wide swathe of stuff, you know. It is fantastic, not just American history, but, you know, he goes into the same sort of depth, you know, the same sort of investigative depth, almost like an investigative journalist, but in a lot of areas of history. Absolutely fantastic. You should go to his channel, you should, you know, follow, and, you know, watch his stuff, and look at his back catalogue, man. There is so much great stuff there, man. It's going to make your brain spin like a top, I tell you. So anyway, guys, that's it for tonight. I hope you'll enjoy this, and I hope you will go to the History Guy's channel and give him a follow and watch his stuff, because, yeah, this stuff is bloody mind-bending, you know. And I love it. Anyway, so that's us, guys. Sanjiva, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, hope it's all going well for you in this trying times that we have. I hope that, you know, you're able to make it through. Wear a mask, guys. Don't pay any attention to Trump and QAnon and the far right wing. And if we can make it through to the end of the year, who knows what next year will bring. Hopefully a better year than this. Swanjiva. See you later, motherfuckers.